so let's talk to our esteemed caller. So let me
Set it
just,
up first a little bit before we bring them in.
yeah, I will right now. All right, so this whole thing started when this dude Marc Elliot emailed me a few weeks ago. I'll read the email to you guys that I got. As you guys know, did you let me know when that's done, Dan? As you guys know, I have a lot of interest in Nxivm. I am a believer. I think Keith Raniere is a modern day genius, and he's been unfairly slated as a villain. So does Marc. Marc is an award-winning speaker who lived with Tourette syndrome for 20 years and then beat it completely, mind over body. That shocked me.
That's quite a claim.
And now with the now infamous company Nxivm, he was recently featured in the third episode of the documentary The Vow on HBO. We've talked about The Vow on this show. He actually, and good for him, he sued HBO or was it someone else?
Someone else. A different documentary that was on Stars, I believe it was, called Seduced. That was also about the Nxivm group.
Yeah, check chat, please, Dan. He said, oh, it is. Okay, good. Now he said, I recently saw your coverage of poking holes in the Andrew Tate narrative, which is true. Now, I've been critical of Andrew Tate, but I think he does a lot of good things too. And it's just not fair. All he wants to do is help a generation of men. And then so what? He's the bad guy? Men need a voice. That's where me and Marc Elliot agree. Given your commitment to pursue truth and openness to challenge prevailing narratives, Marc said in his email to me, I believe you would be fascinated with my story and the recent developments that have unfolded in the case against Mr. Raniere's. Specifically, 7 digital forensic experts, including 4 former FBI, have come forward with evidence showing that with scientific certainty that the FBI tampered with the child prawn digital evidence in the trial. Keith was convicted of having child P word and, all kinds of other horrible stuff, which he's all innocent of, according to Marc. Also, the one thing that I find really interesting about Marc is that through Nxivm and with Keith's teaching, Marc, who has Tourette syndrome, is complete. He just said, I'm done. He did, my mind is more powerful than
matter.
And I'm done with Tourette's, he said. So he asked me, would you be open for a short call? He says, I have no doubt you will be at least very intrigued. Thanks for your time. So that's Marc, inspirational speaker. And I said to myself, I am interested. I do want to talk to Marc. And so Marc is actually on the phone, and we've been setting this up for a couple of weeks. So Marc, whenever you're ready, there he is. Thanks, man, for being here. It's so awesome to meet someone like you.
That's great. Thank you so much for having me. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. No, I can hear you great.
Okay, perfect. I heard a little bit of the introduction. Thank you for that.
Yeah, of course. So why did you reach out to me? I guess, first of all, I'm curious about your whole journey. Maybe you could start there.
Well, as I had wrote you in the email, my team, we had been researching different people that are willing ultimately to challenge the status quo.
Right.
And of course, the Andrew Tate was one of the biggest stories. It was an international story. And there was, some people like yourself that were willing to at least question.
Right.
With our situation with Keith and Nxivm is that there has been basically one narrative for the past 5 years. This actually started about 5 years ago. It was in 2000. It was in October of 2017.
Now,
when
just
the New
to
York
clarify,
Times article.
Keith Raniere is the leader. I guess I don't know what's the correct term of Nxivm, and he was convicted for, it was like 7 different felonies, huh? But he didn't do any of it.
Yeah, so I'll definitely get to all of that. what he was convicted of many different things, including sex trafficking, forced labor, racketeering,
Wire
and yes,
fraud.
although I believe
Yeah.
wire fraud. Yeah. Now, although I believe he's innocent, that's ultimately not why I reached out to you.
Right.
It was given the fact that the narrative was basically an international narrative creating this. Basically was a hate campaign against Keith Raniere and Nxivm and the community.
Sure.
Anyone that was trying to speak out was basically vilified. Anyone that came out in support of, forget Keith, even just came out of support of Nxivm was vilified in the media.
I actually really support Nxivm. I think it's super interesting what they've been able to do. I want to say Andrew Tate, I totally poke holes in that. Like, I don't know if you've been following the case in Romania, but like there's so many red flags that says he's innocent. I don't know if you've been following that.
I haven't been following it closely. Obviously, it's definitely been something I've been watching from afar, as it seems like there's just a lot of similarities in the fact that, we live in a time that if you make someone a monster in the media, it's, guilty, basically you're guilty until proven innocent.
Right.
You then, the authorities can then ultimately do whatever they want to the person.
Sorry to cut off. Actually, Keith was convicted of 7 crimes, though.
Yeah, the reason I said that is because before the trial even happened, he was already vilified and made into a monster. You even have, even on the Dr. Oz show, this was before Keith was even arrested. You have Dr. Oz saying on national television that Keith raped and tortured women.
Oh my God.
Now, just so you know, even after he was convicted of these charges, and this is what's mind-blowing for a lot of people, Keith Raniere, who's this alleged sex cult leader of an international sex cult, if you actually look at the charges and the evidence of what he was convicted for, there's not a single charge. This is crazy. There's not a single charge of violence, weapons, or drugs, and there's not a single charge of Keith Raniere having sex with someone.
Well, let's see here. Count 2. Let's see. Sexual exploitation of a child. He was convicted of that, right? Because I want to clear his name with you. So he was convicted of sexual exploitation of a child, possession of child pornography. He was convicted of trafficking for labor and services, extortion, sex trafficking, forced labor, attempted sex trafficking. So he tried and failed, but in other ways he was successful. That's what they claim, right? But it's outrageous that and he was never, he was never violent, and so that kind of says it all, huh?
Yeah, I want to be super clear. There's most of what people have heard about Keith in the media, and then what the government, put out there in the media as well, is, in my opinion, completely false, and most of it is completely fabricated.
Right.
Again, that's not my intent of why I wanted to come, on and talk with you guys. Obviously, if we had longer, conversations, we could look at more specifics and things about Keith Raniere and who he is as a person. But in the emails, why I got in touch with you is that one of the things that happened right before the trial, here you had an investigation for a whole year, and there were 6 co-defendants, and this whole case was about consenting adults. And then 55 days before trial,
it was also about wire fraud, trafficking, racketeering, child pornography.
Yeah, so those were all the different charges.
Okay.
But even with
sorry. Go ahead.
Well, just to be clear though, even with all of these horrific charges, sex trafficking, forced labor, racketeering, none of the co-defendants had pled guilty. Wire fraud. None of them had pled guilty, which is almost unheard of in federal court. I think it's like 97%.
You couldn't flip them because they're innocent. There's nothing to flip.
So the thing is that 55 days before trial, all of a sudden the FBI found child pornography. And when I say child pornography, they found 22 photos of a nude woman on an external hard drive. It wasn't on his computer. It wasn't on a camera. It was on a random external hard drive in a residence that many people frequent in. It wasn't even Keith's home. So, of course, the moment they found that, it completely changed the whole dynamic of the case, where now you have minors involved.
Right, and they could have planted. I mean, the FBI has a track record of doing stuff like that. I mean, they're just monsters. The FBI, I don't trust them at all, and I think they probably planted it. But my concern, at least just from the optics point of view, because again, I'm on your guys' side. Camille was a 15-year-old who testified. She wrote a victim statement, impact statement, that said that he actually raped her when she was 15. And she put out a statement and all that. It's crazy. She said she met him when he was 13. And then when she was 15, he was 45 and he slept with her. But that's just, why was she lying like that?
Yeah, so I want to make something very clear. I don't support sexual assault against women in any way.
No, I know.
Any of my friends
of course.
who are out there, I just want to make that very clear,
Of
as it's a very
course.
sensitive subject.
Yeah, of course.
What I was saying, though, and then I will get to she did say those things, but what's important to realize is that the child pornography was all of a sudden found 55 days before trial, and then all other co-defendants pled guilty. So not only was he charged with possession of child pornography, he then was also charged with sexual exploitation of a minor, which is probably one of the most egregious charges somebody can get against them, charged against them, which ultimately is a death sentence for many people.
Yeah, and just to go back to what you're saying, 55 days before trial, it's like, when did they have the time to investigate that,
Well, they also had this hard drive and this alleged camera for over a year.
So
that's the context which happened right before trial. Yes, Camille, her name is Cami. She did give a victim impact statement, but what is important for people to realize is that a victim impact statement is after the trial is over, after the verdict. So it's a statement not given under oath. Well after the trial was over, and she also didn't testify.
You think she's lying, essentially? I mean, or at least there'd be no consequence to her lying, right?
That's my point. I'm not here to debate whether or not.
Yeah, you don't want to call her a liar. I get it. But you know what's crazy?
What I'm saying is.
Okay, go ahead. Yeah.
What I'm just saying, it's important that if we want to live in a society that has due process and we care about justice, it's important to question.
Absolutely.
It's important to question. And my point is, if somebody gives a victim impact statement and says, I was raped and this happened, I'm not saying that's not true, but you can't say that that's ultimately true due process when someone's not under oath.
For sure. There was no trial.
And so that's my point.
There was no trial. Like, why was supposed to take her impact statement seriously when there was no trial?
That is my point.
Okay.
What I do know, which is under oath, and sworn statements, is what I got in touch with you about with respect to, we now have 7 digital forensic experts. And this is what's incredible. 4 of the 7 are former FBI.
Before we go down that thread, I just wanted to mention, and I don't know if this is an issue for you guys, but there was 15 other victim impact statements from all different individuals. So that's like, dang, how do we get over that?
Again, if we had like a 3-hour podcast, I can go into different things. This is the short of it, though. Just to even answer, like I said, my intent wasn't to try to defend or combat like all these different allegations. But again, what people don't realize, the way that the narrative was out there, is that 17,000 people from around the world took these courses. Okay. 1 in 400 of participants in the classes that Keith had created were billionaires. We had people from Stanford, from Harvard, entrepreneurs. These were very thoughtful, rational people taking courses that had a profound effect on their life.
Right? I mean, Scientology is the same way, and they get vilified too. They have tons of famous people, tons of rich people, and it's unfair that Scientology is vilified, don't you think?
I haven't taken Scientology. I don't agree with. But my point is, I don't agree with character assassination, or speaking badly about a group just because they're different or you don't like them. But the reason I mentioned about the 17,000 is that if you actually look at the trial, in the Nxivm trial, there's actually, out of 17,000 people, I think in the trial, don't take my word for it, I think there's only 3 people that were students of the 17,000 that were even claiming they were victims of a crime.
So
three out of 17,000.
Only 3 people claimed that they were molested by Keith.
Well, no, they weren't even claiming that they were molested. There's not even. This is like how the insanity and the the exaggeration of what's out there.
Right.
There's not a single charge of Keith assaulting or raping or hurting anyone means of violence. There's nothing in the trial of that.
Right. There's no violence. They're only saying he coerced them, but that's not really a crime, is it?
Well, that's what they're claiming. But
Right.
my point is that if you want to look at the reality, if you even want to say that everything that happened in the trial is true,
Yeah.
this is a man who's now convicted and sentenced to 120 years without any violence, weapons, drugs.
Right. And I'm with you 100% because coercion's not even a crime. Like it's not illegal to manipulate people.
Well,
it just means you're smarter in a way. You know what I mean? Like if you're able to manipulate people to do what you want, it just means you're smarter.
So again, and this is a whole conversation about, things in the trial.
Right.
But the bigger issue, the thing that is, I think, vital and relevant to everyone who's listens to you, and then also just all citizens in the United States. We now have 4 former FBI agents that were digital forensic experts that have come out that under sworn testimony shows that the child pornography evidence was to a scientific certainty tampered with and also planted.
That is very concerning.
Some of the evidence points that some of the modifications took place while in the possession of the FBI.
That is very concerning. So what is the So what's the goal here? To get a retrial for Keith?
Well, the ultimate goal is trying to investigate these crimes.
Right.
There's clear beyond probable cause that crimes were committed by FBI agents and potentially even the prosecution and maybe other entities as well in the DOJ.
So we're going to
and that is an effective that.
Yeah.
Because crimes were committed against someone who is being tried in a trial to convict them, that person should ultimately be let free.
Let him free.
And so Keith,
let free Keith. Well, what's interesting is that, first of all, the FBI is a criminal organization just from the start. I mean, it's insane the things that they've done to people, like tampering evidence in the case of Keith. But I think that because they did that, we should probably just expunge the extortion, the identity theft, the forced labor, the conspiracy to commit identity theft, exploiting of a child, forced labor. Wire fraud, and so we should expunge all those, huh?
It took me a second to get your humor because there's also a little delay. I was like, "Is he making a joke?" I was like,
"Yeah, I know. Sorry, I just yeah." But so what do we do about those other ones, right? Because we got to convince everyone that Keith is a cool dude.
Well, this is what I'm saying is that we don't need to convince anyone of how cool he is. Someone can think that Keith Raniere, they can believe he's the devil. That's ultimately irrelevant and a distraction to the reality of, did this person receive due process? If we want to live in a society that we want to have a justice system that treats everyone exactly the same, whether you think someone is the devil or you think someone is Mr. Rogers, they should be treated exactly the same under the law. Now, if it's the case that the government actually had evidence on Keith Raniere, then the question then becomes, well, why would they need to fabricate and tamper with evidence?
Right. That is the question. Free Keith. Actually, I want to talk
just to answer.
Oh, go ahead. I wanted to ask you about your
last thing.
Sure, go ahead.
I just wanted to make one other comment because you said, as I know you were being facetious about all these other charges.
Yeah.
If you again, there's these buzzwords of sex trafficking and forced labor. Yes, those on its face value sound horrific.
Right, but what does it even mean?
Exactly. When you think of, if you heard that you're, someone that got charged with sex trafficking, what would you imagine?
Yeah, I would imagine somebody was locked to what do you call? Yeah, locked to a radiator, forced to do webcam work, or you know what I mean?
Exactly.
Yeah.
That's what, and that, by the way, is a real thing. sex trafficking, people being kidnapped,
Yeah.
forced into sex slavery is a real thing. If you actually
So-
look at the evidence of what happened in this trial, you have a 29-year-old female who is an actress living in Manhattan, who is a part of the Nxivm community. She was taking classes. She was in a relationship with Keith. She also had a history of being more kinky. Together,
She's
they had come
kinky.
up with an experience where, and this is literally, if you look at the transcripts, this is what happened.
Mhm.
One woman, this 29-year-old, received oral sex from another woman and no money was exchanged. She took a bus from Brooklyn to Albany,
Right.
and they convicted Keith Raniere of sex trafficking.
Just because she was kinky.
Well, that's one way to look at it.
Right.
The same woman, the 29-year-old actress, she's also the victim of the alleged forced labor.
Mhm.
This is a woman who had to transcribe 5 hours of video for a memorial, and she read 50 articles that Keith had written, and she gave feedback on them and actually loved reading them.
Mm.
He was convicted of forced labor.
Because she wasn't
Now-
paid for her work, or what?
Well, that's what they were claiming.
And how old
they
was
were
she?
able to concoct. She was 29 years old. But my
right.
point
Yeah,
is that
right,
there-
totally.
there's what's in the media, which isn't, and of course, if you hear these words, it's not like I don't hear these things, forced labor, sex trafficking, and it causes
Horrible.
me to have caution. And I'm like, holy
Can
crap,
was
what
the-
happened here?
So,
But
this one sounds really bad, and hopefully, because you have such an intimate understanding and you have a great way of explaining it. So, how do we do the sexual exploitation of a child? Because that one sounds so bad. So, how do we break that one down?
that one is also related to the child pornography, as I said. So they found 22 photos of a naked woman. Now, by looking at the photos is not how they realized that it was child pornography.
But it's women
'cause
he knew, right? It was girls he knew.
Yeah, these are women that he knew.
Yeah, and so somebody had pictures of them naked when they were kids, but it wasn't Keith.
Well, no, but this is just if I
Right.
could just finish real quick, is
Right.
that the 22 photos were not deemed child pornography because they were photos of some sexual act. The way that they deemed
They were
them to be child
artsy.
pornography was based off of the file dates. And based off of the file dates, they then said when the photos were taken is when this person
They
would have
probably
been
didn't
15
even
years
look
old.
like kids in the picture.
That's what that's my
Yeah.
point is that by looking at the photo, they weren't deemed child pornography.
And I mean, if you saw the photo, which you should get a hold of those photos, they probably look like
I have not seen them.
adults.
I have not seen the photos.
Oh, you haven't?
Those are, those are contraband photos.
Right.
But my point is that again, when you hear the word child pornography, it incites, all these horrible images and fears. But what we're talking about is on not on someone's computer, not on their camera, not on a camera card, in a random external hard drive. There's 22 photos
Right.
of a naked woman who they deemed was underage because of the file dates. So just the last thing is, the sexual exploitation of a minor is because supposedly they were able to link through a media card and from a camera, and that media card to a scientific certainty by 7 digital forensic experts, 4 former FBI, was modified while in the possession of the FBI because they were able to link that media card to a camera that's allegedly Keith owned. That's how he was charged with sexual exploitation of a minor.
That's so ridiculous that that's all they need.
Wait, I don't know if you're being
No, I'm dead
joking, or
serious.
if
Like,
you're-
what the fuck? Like, it's scary the world we live in where, like, and people can just say whatever, and then you just change the data on a file card, and that's all it takes. It's It's scary. As a man, I'm scared of that.
Everyone should be scared of this. This
Yeah.
is why the reason we're trying to reach out to people is because the narrative is so strong and the prejudice
crazy.
against Keith and Nxivm is so intense, is that basically it stops people from having a rational, open conversation about, wait a
Right.
minute, what actually took place here? And what took place here is not just, there was some prejudice in a trial, is that clearly you have government actors, specific personnel in the FBI. And again, this is not an attack on the whole FBI.
Actually, there's one thing I want to get your thoughts on here. So Camilla's the one who he apparently had photos of. That was the 15-year-old girl who did an impact statement, or she did an impact statement and said that he took her virginity when she was 15, which is outrageous. I mean, the thing is, you can't, if she was willing, what's the problem? I don't get it. But anyway, right? You understand that.
Again,
right.
Whether or not that happened or
it's
didn't
not
happen,
assault if she liked it. And Keith is awesome.
I'm starting to, yeah, I'm feeling your humor a little bit more. Like I said, there's a little delay as well.
So Camilla,
I just want to be
Camilla,
super clear again. I don't support sexual assault, rape in any way.
Yeah.
I'm not here to be able to be a referee about what he said or she said or what happened behind closed doors. What I do know is that I don't believe that somebody giving a victim impact statement that isn't under oath, which is basically no different from somebody going on Twitter and saying, I was raped by this person.
Right. It's just
with absolutely no due process.
Right. Because
could be looked at.
He doesn't even know them. So it's like the same as a random tweet. Like they've never even met.
No, they
do
have
know
met
each other.
Ethan.
Okay. Shit.
They do know, but they do know each other.
They do know each other.
But do you understand what I'm saying, though?
Yeah, no, absolutely. So this girl, Camille, she said in her impact statement that Raniere and his co-conspirator, who also trafficked Daniela for labor and services, said they confined her to a hotel room, or to a room, for nearly 2 years in an attempt to force Daniela to work for him. And then Daniela was told that if she left the room, she would be sent to Mexico without any identifying documents. So that's probably what they mean by like sex trafficking or forced labor, but that's just someone on Twitter just making shit up.
Well, did you see the second season of The Vow?
No, I didn't watch the second season. Was that yeah?
Gotcha. I don't blame you.
Yeah, it was bad. Yeah,
it's incredible. Again, from just the label of somebody, I think it's document servitude. That sounds horrible,
right?
But again, if you just look at the facts, this is a young girl who is who is in a room in her family's home.
Okay,
like she was in a room and the door wasn't locked.
Right.
And if anyone questions me on that, this is incredible. This is how. Amazing how a documentary can seemingly put eerie music on something and make it seem horrific.
Right.
In the documentary, they're actually doing a voiceover of her reading from her lines from the court transcript. So they're reading it verbatim from what she said in court as she was testifying under oath. And at the very end of this episode, as she's talking about how she's been confined to this room for 2 years.
Right.
Do you know how the scene ends?
How?
She says, and then I walked out of the room.
Oh, because she could have left the whole time. They don't really put
because
that
she
out
could
there.
have. Of course, but it's it's the scary music and it's haunting and this illustrations and the cartoon and it's.
Right.
But the way that it's in the media, it sounds as if Keith Raniere kidnapped this person.
I understand.
Put them in a room.
Yeah. I want to ask you,
and that is the issue of again of why I reached out is that in the media can do whatever they want and paint anyone with whatever colors they want to create a certain image, and that does not necessarily match the reality of even just basic facts.
Because it's basically her fault for not leaving the room, and what's even crazier is that the whole jury they all got. I don't know how the whole jury agreed on that.